It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
All right, everybody, welcome back. I wanted to talk about a funny forum post, I guess you could say. Again, at least it's always funny to me because there's always a lot of weird stuff people are saying. But we're gonna get into it today. It's the killer perk meta. It says pain res DMS, pain res DMS, pain res DMS, DMS nowhere to hide, pain res DMS, pain res DMS. Yeah, that's pretty much what we kind of see with the current meta when it comes down to killer. Killer meta really has not shifted, and anytime that it even has shifted, they immediately nerfed it. When we saw, like, the only time I think I ever saw a meta shakeup on killer was like when the gen kick meta got nerfed. That was a massive shift from that. Then it went back to pain res whatever. Then we saw another shift to totems when they buffed up drill the hunt, and then that only lasted a week and they got nerfed, and then nobody ever used them again. So, you know, due to behaviors patches, we just cannot actually get a killer meta that isn't the same exact combination of these things. And mind you, the slowdowns even differ depending on the killer choice. Like, I wouldn't be using DMS pain res on Ghostface because he really doesn't benefit very much from pain res, and that's why I personally say pain res is like a garbage slowdown. And even more so like other slowdowns. I think that the only slowdowns I ever use now and continue to use now are just corrupt and deadlock, because it doesn't require me to get it down for it to work. It doesn't require Ghostface to perform outside of his range, out of his limit. Like, he can only do so much. So when we're rocking those kinds of perks where it just does its own thing, that's when I feel like, okay, I have enough time now to do what I got to do, considering he is very he struggles very heavily with actually getting downs quickly. So then this person says, well, gen speeds and all that, get ready for it. Yeah, basically that is the exact response I would have given as well. I mean, unfortunately the meta has shifted at some points, but then they get removed immediately. But survivor meta pretty much stays exactly the same, as we've even seen from a video with from Mish, well-known survivor main streamer, created a video that literally said, like, the meta has not shifted for years. Like, the meta has not shifted for years, and if anything, the meta has only gotten even stronger for them, considering that we are seeing vigil buffs, ghost notes buffs. We have gotten even 1, 2, 3, 4 added in as well with the new survivor. So that's 2 perks that directly buff gen speed and exhaustion recovery. So that already just only exacerbates, that only emphasizes the issue with the exhaustion and gen speed meta. So that already is going to be kind of a given. This person says, when all the other killer perks get nerfed into uselessness, what do you expect? And that reminds me to mention that we did end up getting slight buffs to some haste perks. So it almost seemed as if we might have gotten haste as a meta for a bit, and then that got nerfed as well. Like, batteries was like at 7% haste, now they reduced it again to 5, but the range is a little further, so kind of pointless. Machine learning, nobody really used, that got nerfed as well. And I think the only one that stayed fine was Unbound or something like that, and even then, like, that has a prerequisite of having to injure first then vault for you to get the haste in the first place. So that already is very situational. Not every character is going to be able to, like, hit and then quickly vault after and then be able to run faster after that. Like, that's only a select few that, and you would need probably superior anatomy to really get enough value from that. So it's really not that cool. This person says, pain res in particular really is an annoying perk to play against, it must be said. There's a part of me that wants to go back to activating on every hook with lower percentage, so I don't have to watch nearly finish gen get reset so far. Now, this is like, I would say that this is probably something you're going to hear a lot from people. The problem is, though, is that we've actually seen previously from when they were dropping the PTB, when Quiet Kills and Aranad were, working together to showcase the changes, Pain Res did absolutely nothing. And when seeing that, it only confirmed my suspicion that like that pain res is pretty ass. Like it's, you know, only going to be effective on characters that can run quickly, like Blight, Hillbilly, Kenneki. Like these are characters that can get a lot of value from a 20% damage, but slow movers like Clown, yeah, like you're not getting much, considering he hit the pain res, and then like there were two gens 99. He hit one for 20%. One popped obviously, then the other one like popped a couple seconds later, so it did nothing against that. This person says, I am also tired of seeing pain res and DMS or deadlock all the time. Pop and nowhere is fair game, but those remote triggering ones are so annoying to deal with constantly. So, like I've said, the only time that you're really gonna notice these things happening is if you're probably in, like, you know, solo queue, so you're probably in low MMR, so your teammates are not gonna know how to loop. And of course, like I mentioned in the example, like we've even seen on video, like if it's a Swift, like they're pumping out the gen, 20% is nothing. Like that, especially with a slow mover. And you know, like I've said, like deadlock, personally, one of my main choices, because, you know, as depending on your character, you may not be able to get full value from pain res and DMS necessarily. But they also say like that's the thing. Like you see a lot of survivors say the same thing. Oh, I'm tired of going against this all the time. And it's like, yeah, but you can also have to kind of go in with the awareness that like the game isn't in the way that it is right now, where gens are as fast as they are. Killers are gonna try to counter that. They're gonna at least try to counteract that, and unfortunately it ends up leading to very, you know, similar matches as the other, because, you know, if they run anything else, they're just gonna end up getting steamrolled. So it's like, why would anybody want to run like low tiers and no slowdowns and all this kind of stuff and then just lose for no reason? Like that just, you know, seems like a waste of your time. So this person replies to them saying that they want it to activate on every hook, which I think is a lot nicer, because 15%, but it doesn't have a prerequisite, is not bad. So this person says, no, you don't want that, because top tier killers would bombard you with it, DMS like before, which is why it got nerfed in the first place, not because Trapper could use it more times, because Blight could completely lock survivors' progress at fast downs, just anything these killers struggle with. That's why it's got token based. You know, I guess, but it would actually incentivize, you know, hooking more than slugging, to be fair, because then you would actually get a bonus from using the old pain res in comparison, to be fair. This person says the real reason with pain res is that if it hits a gen, it's not always 20%. It can go from 20% all the way to 99%. I'll give you a scenario. You know, I'm not about to read all of that. I'm just gonna kind of skim it. I kind of see what they're trying to say. Like it says right here, it says that you can add DMS and Grim to the build and see a game where it's absolutely stalling and boring to play, making it ultra easy to proc, which is inaccurate. Keep in mind that Grim is like, I don't know why people like to constantly promote Grim Embrace. Like, we have to keep in mind that each charge is 10 seconds. Like, the amount of times I've gone against Grim Embrace, I'm like, why are they running Grim for? You're getting 10 entire seconds. Like, congratulations. Like, that's not going to matter, because 10 seconds is just 10 seconds in that moment. Somebody's already pumping another gen with 10 seconds the second you get over there. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Now people try to like calculate around it and go, oh well, if you add it all up, and it's like, yeah, but slowdown in one instance is going to be a lot better than 5 seconds every once in a while. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to say that. I don't know. And that's the thing with, like, when you see discussions like these, they talk real big. They always like to say, oh, they're absolutely stalling the game and it's so boring and it's easy to like, no got no nuance when they talk about this stuff. Like, they talk real big, like, for some reason, you know, but it doesn't actually have any basis in reality. Now, this person actually did reply to what they said, which from skimming it, it seems like they're saying M1s and slow movers, like the range killers, are not really going to get a lot of value, but the high mobilities do. So I'm like, yeah, that's basically what I was saying. And then this random person says, I don't know why people lean on these perks so hard. I do much better with that anti-gen. Now, the one thing I will say, though, is if you're not using any anti-gen and you're doing perfectly fine, you're probably not at an MMR level where it matters that you're bringing any slowdown. And I think that's the thing that people need to get some kind of awareness for, is that, you know, there's two kinds of paths that people take with this game. There's either A, they will run the slowdown because they know it's strong and they want to win their games, regardless of if they really need it or not at their MMR level. There's the other kind of people that say, oh, I don't need to run these because you know, my games are easy. And it's like, well, then that means that you don't need to run them, therefore you're at an load at like maybe like a low average MMR, then that's fine. Then there's a third person, you know what I mean, like the third path that I forgot to mention, where you kind of run it because you're like, I've had so many matches in a row where the gens are so quick that you're like, I have to run this to at least have the game last a little bit longer. This person makes a good point. They say, I wish I would stop going against Decisive Strike, Dead Hard, Unbreakable, and Deliverance every second chance on Perk Under the Sun, but one can dream. This person says, I'm not a fan of putting all my eggs in one basket. I like to bring perks with a bit of everything. For slowdown, just a bit of corrupt intervention. Personally, I wouldn't, like, it really depends on the character. So that's why, like, you know, we can't really take like these kinds of comments in face value, because it's extremely dependent on which character you're using. Like, there's some characters that kind of need corrupt and also deadlock to help them, you know, keep up and set up you know, throughout the match. So like Nemesis is a good example. Like, you would need corrupt so you can get enough time to get some infection. You're probably going to need deadlock too, because you're probably not having level 2 or 3 yet, maybe throughout the match or whatever have you, or have to reinfect, blah blah blah. So you kind of need that extra time. So this person says EMS is the main perk that can be a real board averse, especially if you use perks that force survivors off the gen. Heard solo queue more than Swift, but not anything that needs urgent attention. I agree with that. It's like, I've seen this countered tons of times, like when I've even used DMS, and that's why I stopped using DMS as a whole, is that I would get a ping and res DMS off once, and the next thing you know, like, I would notice like the gen that I'm about to like go towards is what they're working on that has the most amount of progress, and I will look over, somebody's already letting go of a gen that's like 1% to counteract the DMS. And it's like what a waste. So this person says, I personally mostly only run with corrupt, but I can see how someone who has trouble with chases would want to be able to buy as much time as possible. At the end of the day, maxing out gen perks mean you're banning all other utility, and that's a choice killer players should be able to make. So that's what I'm saying. Like, when you see stuff like this, you have to keep in mind, like, this is low or average, which makes sense. Like, the vast majority of people are in low to average MMR. So, you know, because it's not consistent with my own matches, because like, obviously anybody who's watched my matches, you guys know, like, it is ridiculous how fast gens get done. And without the slowdown at all, probably would have just been even more difficult than they already are. So when it comes to this, when you're saying that you only run corrupt and that's it, that probably tells me that your matches are not going to be that difficult where you even need the slowdown. And it also depends on killer. They never mention which one they're using. This person says you don't need many utility perks on killer, which that's a bit of a general statement that doesn't really make sense. Chase perks should only be picked if wanted and if it is synergized with the killer. You could just take out the if wanted. You just say if it's synergized with the killer. That's it. Like, because there's just some perks that just don't work on certain killers that just make no sense. For already nowhere to hide, usually the best option. Doesn't make sense to replace it. Maybe a nurse is calling if your killer can use it well. I always see that too. They always love saying nurse is calling, but like, there's like one killer that uses it well, like maybe two, like that in the entire roster. So I don't know what they're talking about. And that killer would probably just be Pyramid Head because he has the range and can go through walls with it. That's about it. I mean, maybe Wraith, I guess, but like you're just kind of wasting your own time, you know, your own perk slot. I mean, basically nothing else worth picking left. Maybe Stabiffle, anti-heal perk like Colorophobia, goofy perk like Blood Warden. Stabiffle makes sense if you're running on M1 only, like Pig, Trapper, Skull Merchant. Like Save the Best makes sense. Like you're M1ing 99.9% of the time, if not 100 at that point. So like you kind of need to have something. Anti-heal, I mean, I don't even run that anymore, depending on the killer. Especially like who the hell is running Colorophobia, by the way? Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, for me, it doesn't make sense. Well, maybe at that, you know, maybe at that MMR level it does, but Colorophobia, at least from my perspective, from where I play at, I'm just like, I just don't see like what value does Colorophobia have when there is like the fastest healing in the West. Like they've got tons of healing perks that are so fast. Like 50% gets out healed by 2 heal perks combined. Like you could put on Botany, will make it, and what is it, reducing it by like 50% or something, but they're gonna get healed up with Reassurance or something even before that. This doesn't seem like it's worth it. But these 2 perks never have to come off because you can't go wrong with them unless you're doing a certain build like full hex, which I wouldn't run full hex either because it gets destroyed so fast. So this person says deadlock for me is not as annoying. Once a gen is locked up, I just do a different gen. Exactly. I've said this even for like Grim Embrace. Like when I played Survivor, I literally just would wait 10 seconds. I wouldn't even leave the gen. I just stand there. I'm like, all right, I'll wait. Because 9 times out of 10, the killer using it is not fast. Or the killer using it is not going to go to where I'm at. So I'm like, hey, I'm just going to wait out the 10 seconds. It's worthless. This is for Pain Resonance. I typically let go before the person to hook to see if it's in play. Dead Man Switch can be a bit more frustrating, especially if used against a Kaneki with the Amori's Mask, which is fine. Typically I see Pop Pain Res corrupt more than I see the prior ones coupled with DMS, which I even argue that Pop sucks ass too. Like it's kind of sad that, you know, considering that our like the meta for killer hasn't shifted and the perks that they do have are trash. So I'm like, and I've already discussed why Pop is bad ad nauseum at this point. I think anytime that it comes up, I'm always mentioning like the fact that the way that the math works, it's 20% of current progress. So that means that a gen could be at let's say 30% completed, so 30 charges. It would take a percentage of 20% of 30 charges. So you're probably gonna get like 10 or 5 or whatever it is, like a very low amount. The only time you're gonna see 20% of a gen, like of all charges, 20% of that is when the gen is at 99%, which is terrible from my perspective. Because at least with Pain Res, you know for a fact 20% is 20% no matter what. Pop is doing some math and it's gonna be like, well, I don't feel like giving you the 20. I'm gonna give you like 5% instead because it only had like 10, and you're like, or not even. I'll give you 5% if it's like maybe 20% of the gen or something, like 20% of 20 or whatever the heck. Like, is where it says, even when I play, you do not see every survivor use deliverance. I do see quite commonly personally, but I wouldn't say every single game, but I would say it's pretty common. Sure, you have a point on Dead Hard or Decisive Strike, anti-tunneling. Other survivors use live, sprint burst, deja vu windows made for this. Survivors not a monolith, you typically see a variation. You know, and that's the thing. Like, you see a variation because they have so many options. If we're complaining about survivors using specific perks, I'd like to point you at the fact that the last survivor perks, along with killer perks, are conditional. Clean break, and even that's conditional because I have to heal someone and be healed and hit the button. This doesn't really directly address what is meta though. Like, notice that these perks that are meta, like Windows, is just active 100% of the time, doesn't need activation. Deja vu, active at all times, doesn't need activation. Sprint burst, you press one button and then you're already flying off. Fly, you vault something and then you already fly off. Like, these are not things that require input from the killer. That doesn't require any interaction with the killer at any means. So you can say, oh, but clean break, and it's like, but that's not meta, nobody uses it. So like, they're not, it's not the same. You can't say killer perks and survivor perks are conditional to try to say like, oh, well, if we're complaining, like, no, no, there's a valid reason to complain. I would, in my opinion at least, about perks that just exist for, like, you know, without any input versus that perks that don't, basically, right? Or like that do, rather. Typically, also behavior should focus more on lines on perks or rework perks instead of leaving them allowed to be conditional. No reason for road light to be as conditional as it is when we're showing a rig perk. Same invocations to restricting. All right, this person says, so you never see it, so it's not prevalent enough to be a problem. Only your POV matters. I see Deli quite often. Maybe I just go against a higher caliber. Good point. Dead Hard is not an anti-tunnel perk. It does not expire after time. All it does is take to be hooked once. Losing to the killer, by the way. I do agree with that. I do think it's like, by its definition, is anti-tunnel, right? Because if you're getting unhooked and then that it's activating, yeah. To me, that fits the bill. However, it does make a good point that it doesn't expire after time, and it does just get given to you by losing. Decisive strike can be used aggressively, often paired with unbreakable, so they can get away no matter how bad the mistake on them or the team. Even just fake a gen to try and force value out of it. Wow, such anti-tonal. I do agree with that. I do agree with that. I think that, unfortunately, like, that's can be paired together, and then it leads to that situation where it's a lose-lose. Like, you don't want to get stunned, but then they get up anyway, so like, it doesn't even matter which way you go. They're still just, they still are being let go. Like, they're still being you know, reversing your pressure. So it's like, it just kind of sucks that that is the case, but it is a very common combination. Survivor's not a monolith, but killers are, seems one-sided. Clean break should not just be available to pop on your own. The whole point of the perk is for you to take a risk for an automatic heal that lets you be extra efficient for it, like healing while doing a gen. And that's why syringes were as strong as they were. So when it comes down to it, like, that checks out. They say, I would say that's a huge problem with a lot of the best served perks is that they give too much for doing nothing or just losing. Take botany. I would say it's an old version when it decreased efficiency with medkits was its most fair, because you had to give up something for the strong passive boost. Now it's just free, and this kind of perk design reduces the overall skill of the game as there's no risk using these perks. This is exactly my perspective when looking at the buffs. I completely agree with this. I've said this all the time when talking about this sort of like perk buffs and things like that, because botany to me was like well designed. You have an upside, you have a downside. Like, that makes sense. then they removed it, and then I was like, okay, that makes no sense. Like, we're buffing the heal meta now. I'm like, great. You know, rinse repeat, basically. They continue by saying, meanwhile, I'd like to point out that all gen regression perks require the killer to be willing to work. Pain Res is a Scourge perk that off the bat has an RNG problem of Scourge hook spawns, then a killer has to down a survivor near enough a hook. Then it only works one per person. On top of that, it's a 20%. Not a flat number, a percentage, meaning that these perks effective is essentially wasted if it hits a gen with little regression. I think that I will disagree though, because I think that's its biggest strength. Like the fact that it is just 20%. I think, like, I don't think they understood how pain res works. Like, pain res is always 20% no matter what. Meaning that regardless if the highest progressed gen is at 90%, 50%, 20%, it's always going to end up being minus 20, like no matter what. But the problem is like, I think he confused it with pop. Like, pop is a percentage. It like fluctuates. And deliverance is not in the top 10 for a good reason. You cannot coordinate with others without popping your deliverance early. There's no indicator when deliverance is played, so if you're using it in solo queue, you're opting to pop it before someone comes to you, or allowing the unhook to prevent the broken status effect. I don't think you really need to coordinate with deliverance necessarily. I mean, you just coordinate with your own eyeballs. You look around and see where everyone's at, see where the killer's going, and then jump off the hook. Like, I don't think it's that complicated to do that, because the fact of the matter is that you can get off the hook by yourself. That means that no one has to save you, so you can legit just jump off when you're looking at everybody, because you see the auras of all your teammates. You just look and go, okay, well, they're on a gen, they're about to start getting chased, this person's like on a gen, maybe he's letting go of it, let me jump off now. It's pretty simple. Like, you don't need, it doesn't matter if you're in solo queue or not. Like, regardless, your teammates are still going to be bad anyway in solo queue, so that's not, at least from my perspective, it's not a good argument. Dead Hard is an anti-tunneling perk. Get hooked, killer still on you, you can tank the hit. Yeah, I guess. Because I already had said this anyway. Let's say if you're arguing that the size of strike is not anti-tunnel, complaining that it's used with Unbreakable, that is a U problem when you're taking the risk. See, DS users not use UB if decides to wait out their DS. So instead of them actually acknowledging what the person says, they just make up some straw man and run with it, which makes no sense. Because nobody said that DS was an anti-tunnel. They're saying that it's an anti-tunnel that doesn't really work the way that it's sort of advertised. Because the idea is that it's supposed to be like preventing or at least mitigating the tunneling, quote unquote. But it can be used aggressively. So that's what they're trying to say, that like that people can just use it outside of what it was intended for. And then they want to say it's a you problem. Like, no, it's not the person's problem. It's called the game has an issue that needs to be fixed. That's a game problem, not the you problem. What are you talking about? And then they want to immediately go, shit, DS users not use perks. Like, shut up, bro. Like, they never want to engage and actually think outside the box for 2 whole seconds. Like, dog, we're obviously saying that combination is really cheese, but it's in the game, so oh well. Like, we just want it out of it. We just want it fixed. And then here comes the entitlement. If you're gonna tunnel me or any other survivor out of the game, you're gonna have to work for the hook itself. I'm not. Other survivors will give you free pressure and allow you to continually hook to cause a 1v3. I'm like, yeah, like that's expected. Also, clean break is situational and conditional. Yeah, like Adoy. With some range changes, it should be looked at for what it is. I'm like, okay. Clean break will not have as much utility, especially in solo queue. I don't know why people want to bring up solo queue like that's an argument. Like, nobody, like, bro, solo queue is not what we should be balancing the game around, bro. Just because something doesn't work in solo queue doesn't mean Swift can't use it, bro. Like, come on now. And if it can be used in solo queue, maybe that might be a little too strong, depending on what the perk does and what it is. Come on now. And the fact that it caused yourself to be broken while being specifically healed by another survivor, the 60 seconds would actually trigger the full health state. It's like, I guess. But we do remember that Vigil exists, right? Vigil will completely reduce that timer by quite a bit. So I'm like, I don't really think that's a big deal. Ooh, they replied. They said, look at your thread. You're in complaining about killers only using 2 perks. It may not have said it, but we were in a thread with the pretext that killers only use 2 perks. And it said, quote, even when I play, I don't see every survivor use Deliverance, LOL, which is completely anecdotal. But then you go on to say Deliverance is not in the top 10 for a good reason. Top 10 of what? I'm going to assume light stats, and yes, it's not top 10 currently in 35, higher than other perks that have been spoken about before, so this is off the record and conviction. Point being that just because its pick rate is not high does not mean it's a fair perk. Remember, it only needs to be 1 out of the 4. With perks like this being more common against more sweaty teams, so people who would be in a higher bracket would encounter this more than a mid player would. Now they say that Dead Hard is not an anti-tunnel, as you can save its use for any time after the first hook. So if you get hooked first in the match, then the killer goes on to hook everyone else, so you have access to Dead Hard, which they do drive a I was gonna say they drive a hard bargain, but it does make a good point. However, like it does fit the bill, I guess you could say, of like anti-tunnel, but he does make a good point that it can still be used outside of that, so it's not a bad point. And then it says, are we really gonna say that sprint burst and live are anti-tunnel perks? That would mean anything that gives you a burst of power in the moment, anti-tunnel. Which I don't think that's what they said, but let's continue. So they said Dead Hard is just a pocket third health state that you get for losing. Not what I would call healthy perk design, which I do agree with that. That's a very valid point. I've always disliked that perk. I always thought it was just very anti-skill, because like at the end of the day, like you're losing and then getting rewarded in a health state for losing. Like that doesn't really make any sense. Especially when killer doesn't have any perks that do that. Like you don't really have any like substantial rewards that give you so much pressure for its existence like that. To that extent, because like, you know, sure, you can wait it out or do whatever you want with Dead Hard, but like there's some instances where, you know, you can either there's a couple different paths that it goes. Like you can either forget that it's meta and then you end up hitting it by accident. There's times where you can like try to delay your swing, but the animation is supposed to be like a half second, but it lingers because of just servers, so you end up hitting it anyway, you know, you delayed it. And then there's just also instances where it just pops and you just don't know like how they had the health state because there was no animation of them actually activating the perk. Metal of Man is also I would say it's a pretty nice perk design wise, because you have to actually help your teammate. There's interaction with the killer, and you can go down if you mess it up. This is why clean breaks should function as it is, because having an automatic heal while you do something else is huge. That's why the syringes used to be a problem. Too useful out of chase, free health state, insanely efficient. Yeah, I agree with that too. Oh, this person makes a good point. They said, I don't understand how a perk that is forcing killers to spread hooks, even if its first isn't healthy when tunneling, is problematic viewed from now. It's not problematic. So this person doesn't know what they're talking about. They say, you say that person acquire downs, but the fact of the matter is that only really terrible killer players don't get quick downs these days in the current patch. No, that's not exactly accurate. There are some characters that quite literally just do not have the capability to get a quick down, like compared to, say, Drac, Hillbilly, Blight, Nurse. Like, they're just characters that exist that require a lot more time than it would be for those characters. Ooh, another one says Liver's not in top 10. Really, I don't know why they keep bringing up solo queue. Most players do not play solo queue. People love saying that, but that's gaslighting from the DVD community. As we've seen from the data given from behavior, I think it's about 30% of players. I think it's like 30% were actually in solo queue, if I'm not mistaken. But even before that, like, we had no data to that was at like of the current day showing us that solo queue is somehow this most common thing. No, it's not. According and like you know, literally what that other person had responded, according to Nightlight GG. Hardly see people use deliverance. Sure, people using your games, you're implying that many survivors use deliverance. I would say that it's quite common. I wouldn't say it's common as like decisive, but it's quite common. I would say if I had to give it a rating out of 10, it'd be like, I would say it's like a 7 or something out of 10 in terms of common. Like, it's not rare, but it's also not super common, but it is common enough where I'm like, I remember that it happens quite a bit. That hard as an anti-tunneling perk becomes usable when you're hooked and unhooked. Yeah, I mean that, you know, which is wild. I do agree with that part. You know, just because of just how anti-tunnel activates usually. Terminating exhaustion perk, especially sprint burst, is anti-tunneling. What the fuck? I use sprint burst and the killer has come back to technically tunnel, but give up and go for the unhooker as had too much distance on them. Which, I mean, tells you exactly what you need to know about the player. Like, they want to use cheese. It seems like, so that's interesting. And determine anything that helps you not get tunneled that's anti-tunneling. Would agree that Dead Hard being used as the only exhaustion perk with 2 uses and people not needing to play around Dead Hard is where we have tunneling much more prevalent. Why wait out Dead Hard if I have to ignore it twice per trial? Yeah, like that's a response that you get from somebody who doesn't play killer. Because this lacks all nuance and understanding of what hitting a Dead Hard it really can do. But I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, comment, subscribe to all the YouTube things. Consider supporting the channel with the links, of course, by becoming a member or joining the Patreon. And let me know your thoughts in the comment section about the topic. See you guys in the next one. I wanted to go ahead and thank all my members from Patreon, Crow King 101, YouTube members, Majora Jeff, T.O.N. Dyer, Zero Mocker, Christian, Crow Vader, Noxus, Jack, Dole, a whip. Let's go. Twitch. We also have Cake, Danica, Final Girl Bunny, Zero Mocker, Ginsburg, Zaz, Crow, PB Head, Mr. Morik, and Dole as well. I appreciate all you guys for supporting, and I will see you guys. If you want to become a member, go ahead and join, and I will see you guys in the next one.